Next slide, Lori. There we go. So again, introductions. I'm Zoltan Sarda. I'm a consultant with performance assessment development with the CTC, focusing on Gen Ed CalTPA.
And good morning, I'm Cassandra Henderson. I'm also a consultant in performance assessment development with the CTC, and I am focusing on the development of the early childhood education CalTPA.
And good morning, everyone. I am Lori Thornley. I'm a program manager with Evaluation Systems, the CTC's technical contractor. And today we will be taking a deep dive into Cycle 2. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone knows how to access the materials. For faculty and staff, they are located on the CTC exams webpage. The URL is listed there. They are available in downloadable zip files, password protected zip files. And if I will type the password in the chat window. Also, you can email caltpa@pearson.com for password information or any other information, technical information pertaining to CalTPA. And are you still able to see my screen?
Yes, but if you hit to the next slide, it will bring in the template or the image, I think. Oh,
no, I am going to stop the slideshow for a second and then restart it.
Okay. We've been having, experiencing what teachers have been experiencing the last year and a half over these conversations. There we go.
There we go.
All right, let me try this again.
It's definitely an empathy building exercise for
So no one's exempt from this practice, right?
There isn't.
Okay, cross your fingers, everyone.
Okay, here we go.
All right, is it?
We're seeing a black screen. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Yay. Uh-oh. Oh, you're on mute, Lori.
I am back. Zoltan, you probably need to, nope, I am still co-host.
Okay. And Lori just got a new computer, so that's could be part of the problem. It's breaking it in.
All right, I think I'm sharing a screen.
Yes, you are.
All right, am I sharing a slide?
You're sharing, it's just not in presentation mode. Or yeah, view.
All right, I'm getting a message saying that PowerPoint is unstable and I should restart it.
Okay. While we're at it,
Apologies,
I'm going to put the website address for the materials into the chat here.
Let me know, Lori, if you want me to share screen.
That's where the materials can be obtained. And the password for those materials is here.
Better?
We don't see the screen yet. It's just black. Okay, I'll put that in, Nancy. Hold on a sec. And then I'm also going to put in the CTC CalTPA email as well. We lose Lori? Looks like we did. Let's give her one more minute to see if we can get that going, and then otherwise, Cassandra, I think maybe we'll have
Sure.
to share your screen if that works.
Sure.
And do you have the guides up as well?
I do not.
So hopefully she'll be back. There we go.
Thought I go up here. Just make sure I have.
Okay. And I'll just keep an eye out for Lori coming back in.
Okay, let's see what we got here.
Okay, and again, we want to make sure on this that the programs and candidates are using version 4.1. That again, that update went out on September 10th. And so with candidates, just make sure that they have downloaded the most current examples. There's just a couple of prompts in the templates that will more clearly align with what the rubrics are.
Okay. And our agenda for today, again, we have a full agenda. Some of this is very similar to our cycle 1. Welcome and introductions we have done. We will talk about webinar norms. We will do a cycle 2 deep dive and take you through the guides and the rubrics. We will have a stretch break. Also, we'll share some tips for completing CalTPA Cycle 2. We've talked a little bit about how to access materials. We'll talk about that again towards the end, and also share with you some program supports that CTC offers.
And again, it's with webinar norms, it's when we have such a small group, I think we can pay attention to some, but again, your microphone has been muted. If you'd like to speak, just feel free to unmute your microphone. With a small group like this, I don't know that we need to always use the chat. If a question's coming up for you, just feel free to unmute and ask that question, or you can use the chat as well. Again, questions, you want to keep them to a general focus about the CalTPA. If there are other questions that you have about candidate or program specific questions, we can do that through our email addresses. Avoid multitasking so we can focus on the content and move through it quickly. Honoring time for both participants and presenters by moderating participation, and then it's helpful to adjust your view to speaker view instead of gallery view so you can see the presenters and who's speaking. So Lori, are you back? You're back, right?
I don't know if she's back because I'm sharing
I
screen.
am back. Yeah,
Oh,
I am
yay.
back.
Okay.
I think it's probably best for you to continue sharing your screen for the slides, Cassandra.
Okay, perfect.
I can try to share my screen when you go to the guide.
Okay, perfect. No problem.
That's great.
All righty.
Okay, so the CalTPA overview.
Okay.
And again, we'll go briefly through this. We talked about this on Tuesday. or actually Wednesday. So again, the 2 instructional cycles, both based on a 4-step process of plan, teach and assess, reflect and apply. Cycle 1 was focused on learning about students and planning instruction. Cycle 2, that we're going to get into today, is focused more on assessment-driven instruction. And again, we referred to this before, but the guide at times for people seems like it's redundant, but that is intentional in its design, that the information is presented in 3 ways. First, a broad overview of what the steps are for candidates. There's an evidence table that, again, we'll show you, point out as we go through cycle 2 guide, that tells them step by step what to do and what evidence to provide for each of those. And then the step-by-step guide, which is what the candidates will be using, and that is more closely aligned to the templates that they use. Again, working with candidates, it's very helpful if they can look at all these components of the CalTPA side by side, looking at the steps in relation to the rubrics. Again, we see in office hours, we have candidates who have been really paying attention to either the templates or the steps, but they're not really looking at the rubrics. And it's very helpful if they will, they work with those side by side and then even review their submissions with that same kind of process.
Some tips for introducing cycle 2. Information in the green call out boxes. You saw those when we talked about cycle 1. You will see them again in the cycle 2 guide. And those are important. Please encourage candidates to read them and not skip those, because they do have important details that talk about submissions and components of their submissions. Also, as we talked about for cycle 1, please introduce your candidates to the rubric-based scoring system, the structure and the levels, the essential questions. Very important, the meaning of and versus or, defining a construct and reviewing the footer information, which is the evidence the assessor will look at for that rubric.
And again, we spoke about this in cycle 1, thinking like an assessor when they're approaching looking at the rubrics. So again, the assessors really, that first piece of really understanding what the essential question is looking at. Today, when we go through, we're going to just really focus, rather than on the multiple constructs in the rubrics, we're going to really focus more on what is the essential question getting at. Again, starting with level 3, looking for evidence in the sources of evidence. The assessor will go construct by construct at level 3. And if all 6 constructs, like in rubric 2.1, they find a source of evidence for each of those, then they will move on to level 4. If there is not evidence for one of those constructs, they will move down to level 2 and keep going until they see that where it's ending, where you have all the constructs as evidence for all the constructs. And again, this is a process that's useful for peers to be looking at each other's work and doing this process with them, just lining it up. Where's the evidence? Is it sufficient evidence for that construct? If there is, move to the next one. Okay, and we are going to move to the cycle. So again, as we move through this, feel free to just either put a question in the chat or just unmute and ask the question.
Zoltan,
Yes.
Going back a ways, I apologize.
No.
The change to version 4.1, when I downloaded the materials, the marking 4.1 I only saw on the assessment guide, and then on multiple subject, single subject, the lesson plan template, and the application to what you learned template. So it wasn't 4.1 on all of the templates. It was just, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
So if you downloaded it from the website, it should be the template should be the current, correct, Lori?
So the templates that changed are for cycle 2. there's only one template that changed, cycle 2, and that is part K, the written narrative, next steps for learning. That template is now in version 4.1.
Right.
All the other templates are the 4.0. They did not change.
Okay, when I first heard it came out, I thought, okay, well, they'll all say 4.1, but it's, so I just wanted to make sure they weren't all 4.1, just those few.
That's correct. The only one in cycle 2 is part K. There were 2 templates in cycle 1 that changed and are now in version 4.1.
Thanks for the confirmation. I
You're welcome.
just want to make sure that.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
Should I stop sharing at this point, Lori?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're going to go to step 1.
Are we there?
No, we don't see your screen.
Just a black screen.
I am sorry, folks.
Let me see if I could bring that up. Apologies for the technical difficulties today.
So for cycle 2, you're going to see a similar structure, the same structure that you saw for cycle 1. Are you able to scroll down, please, Zoltan?
That's Lori actually sharing.
Oh, sorry, Lori. Sorry.
Oh, so you're seeing it now?
I saw the first page, but
did
now
for
I
a
have a black
second.
screen.
I'm just need to bring it up on my computer, so we will get there in a moment.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Zoltan and Cassandra. I do not
It's
know
okay.
what's going on with my computer.
Okay,
It's okay.
this will just take me a moment to bring it up.
It happens. And this is great time to brainstorm all of the wonderful ways you are going to work with candidates on cycles 1 and 2. There you go.
Okay. And now my computer is being slow. Oh, come on. Okay, I will share my screen now. And thank you for bearing with us. Okay, can you see?
Yes, if you can just
Okay.
make it like have it fill your screen, then we'd be perfect. Oh, we have somebody joining us. Oh, that's Lori. Somebody else named Lori is joining us. If you can click that, will it make it big? Oh, I see. I don't see it on mine. How about that? The upper right-hand square. Okay, can you all see that well enough? Okay, good. So you have the preamble and all of the table of contents. Here's where we begin with the same, an overview, just like cycle 1. Oop. It's still scrolling. Yeah. Okay, all of this is the same. And then we get down to evidence table. Evidence table. Cycle 1 had that as well. And if we keep going, we will get into the steps. Okay, so here we go. Again, you see immediately you see two green call out boxes. Those are very important. Step one is getting to know your students. So the candidate's going to provide information listed below about the context they're working in and the students. They're going to describe students' assets and learning needs again. They're going to give the contextual information for the class, grade levels, ages, content areas, all of that. Okay. And then in part 2, learning segment of step 1 plan, this is where they're going to plan a content specific learning segment that includes 3 to 5 lessons drawn from a larger unit. This is different than cycle 1 where they were focusing on 1 lesson. Okay. And it has to include instruction and assessment that is asset-based and UDL practices. It has to include informal assessments, checking for understanding during the instruction, and formal assessments and rubric. Okay, here's another green call out box. Okay. And then part B, these are the pieces and questions they'll be answering. This is the learning segment, part B. These are the questions they'll be answering and things they'll be addressing in that part B. Okay. Okay, part 3 of step 1 plan is assessment and description. So they have the informal assessment. How are they going to check for understanding? 2 more green call out boxes here. They need to read those. Okay. Student self-assessment. This has been an area where candidates often get confused. There are a couple of things they are doing in this step. So they are modeling how the students can self-assess using a rubric. Then they are having a one-on-one conference with a student, at least one student, with that student using the rubric to self-assess and having a discussion about it with that student. Okay. 2 more green call out boxes, as you can see. Okay. I want to remind again, just like I did in cycle 1, ELD goals are important. All students are English learners. Okay, and they want to make sure they're citing evidence to how they know what they know about how the lesson went and what students mastered and learned during the lesson. Okay. Okay, and this right here shows again evidence to be submitted, which is also in the evidence table. So it is parts A through F for this first step.
And so getting into the rubrics for this, again, apologies for the scrolling. I always have to look away when somebody else is scrolling on the screen. Okay, so a couple of key differences for cycle 2 for this current version. One, it used to be in version 3 that candidates had to provide a rubric for the informal assessment. Currently, they do in this version. There's no need for a rubric for the informal assessment. But the first rubric 2.1 is really focused on the learning segment and the appropriate content-specific learning goals and ELD goals if they cite that there are English language learners in the classroom. And what are those assessments and rubrics that offer students multiple ways to demonstrate knowledge? And this additional language here in rubric 2.1 to affirm and validate students' assets, including strengths, experiences, and backgrounds. And again, we're going to talk about this a little bit. We talked about it somewhat in basically the same thing in cycle 1. It's really not just thinking about what are the students' likes, but how do we bring their assets and knowledge and cultural backgrounds into the design of the curriculum that we are using with them. Again, there are 6 constructs on level 3. And again, here are the sources of evidence. So again, getting the candidates when they do that process of looking at each construct and going step by step, finding a piece of evidence in any of those sources, and they only need to find one piece of evidence for each construct. For cycle 2 or for step 2, or I'm sorry, rubric 2.2. And this one is really about that concept of alignment between the lessons in the learning segment and the progression of learning. So does the candidate create a learning segment in which assessments and rubrics, instructional strategies and lessons align and build on one another to provide a progression? That's the key piece here. Progression of the learning that develops the students' concepts and skills. So we have seen candidates submit 3 to 5 lessons that are loosely connected, but really we want to see what are the learning goals, what are the standards, and how do the lessons, activities, and the assessments build on that conceptual understanding or those skills that we're working. So the progression is the key piece, I think, in this particular rubric. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Cassandra, if you could share your screen with
All right.
Okay, so again, we covered this with the cycle 1. Again, the key here is that all students bring assets that are wonderful to be part of the curriculum. They have unique perspectives, passions, interests. They have their own personal powers. They have just a range of assets that can be brought, not just for the teacher to attend to in the lesson, but to be building on the curriculum that the teachers are creating.
It's not letting me advance.
Technology is not wanting us to move forward.
No, it's not. I'm sorry, it's not. I have it up here, but it's not letting me. Let me stop share and share again. I apologize. It's not letting me advance here.
I'm really glad it's not just me, so it's all.
Okay. I'm glad there's not 100 people here. Thank you for your patience.
Let's try again. Let me see if I can do it this way.
There we go.
There we go.
There we are. Okay.
I think.
So again, so this slide again has really called out that essential question for rubric 2.1 with this added piece of affirming and validating students' assets, including strengths, experiences, and backgrounds. And again, as we discussed for cycle 1, really working with candidates to develop this mindset of inquiring into the students in their classrooms, their cultural backgrounds, the cultural background of the broader community where the school sits. We'll mention at the end, October 29th for the virtual think tank, we are going to be having a discussion about ways to enhance this work with students.
And as I shared last time, just, please encourage candidates to really think about, there are so many families are made up in different ways and of different groups of people who've had so many different experiences. So I think I shared last time, my children were each given a family tree project to complete and talk about their family's immigration to the United States. And my ancestors didn't immigrate. So it's important to think about those things so that students are not excluded from the curriculum.
So maybe at this point,
I can leave that up if you want to talk about, see if there are any questions. Then we can go.
Well, why don't we go ahead and this one for step 1 is really getting them to be thinking about describing what they're doing, how they're doing it, and why. I think the word here is intentionality. I think for young teachers, teaching can be accidental, sort of, or not intentional because they're sort of trying things out. But this is an opportunity for them to really say, so this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, and this is why, or how I'm doing it, and this is why I think that is the best approach for students. They need to provide the student rubrics for student self-assessment and the formal assessments. Again, if they've named ELD, English language learners in their classroom, they need to have ELD goals mentioned. And then as we spoke before on that second rubric for plan, it's really focused on the alignment between the segment of lessons and that progression of learning. And with that, why don't we, or do we have another? Yeah, okay. So why don't we just maybe do gallery view, and we can pause for questions on step 1.
Yes, I have a question. Is it okay to speak or should I type it?
No, you're fine.
You can speak.
My question is this, is it advantageous for a candidate to do more than 3 lessons for that segment?
I would say it's not, well, in terms of scoring, not necessarily. If they, I would say, I always think if the more you have documented on video, the more you're going to have to pull from to demonstrate what those, what the requirements are. You know, again, I think some candidates think of their filming as they are going to, you know, I'm just going to set up the camera and I'm going to film this little portion to get video clip 1. I actually think if you have 3 to 5 lessons, you videotape the entire thing. It's really helpful. You just have more to think of, to draw from. I used the analogy yesterday, you know, thinking like a documentary filmmaker, you know, for an hour-long documentary film, they shoot hundreds of hours and then they pull clips to tell the story they want to tell. And this is sort of the same, like you're pulling clips to tell your story. And I think that's a way for candidates to think about this instead of thinking I've got to figure out, film this one little piece. It's more natural that way.
I think they miss it too when they do it, when they try to film the piece, because it's much easier to discard parts you don't need. I have seen candidates get to the point where they have done the filming and now they've done the written narratives and they don't have in the clips what they need to demonstrate what they just did. Yeah. And that means starting over. So.
By the way, Nancy, it's nice to see students in the background.
I know, I was looking to
in person. Okay, other questions here?
Just this is probably more general, but I have found myself coaching my student teachers almost to have either note cards with kind of exactly what needs to be seen in the video. So when they're filming, or having it posted on the back wall to make sure, okay, you know, that this needs to be seen in the first video, second video.
Great.
I hope that's going to help more. I just stress that more. Any other just mechanical tips that people have talked about that you've heard of just, you know, sometimes, and I'm thinking more of cycle 1 because that's what I'm focused on with my students right now, but you know, trying to make sure the verbiage is correct within a 5-minute segment is a little bit challenging. If there's any.
I love that idea that you just you sort of providing prompts for yourself, environmental prompts, right? So like, you know, adjust the instruction as needed. It would be a great one to put, you know, put up there. Other thoughts? Things you've seen that have worked.
I appreciate the confirmation. I think that's a good idea. So,
well, I remember when I was beginning teaching, I would write note cards and I put them in my shirt pocket, like, remember to do this and remember to say that, you know, because, you know, when teaching, common things come up all the time. It's like, you know, so next time this happens, this is what I'm going to do.
Yep.
Okay. So we move forward. And I think that's back to you, Cassandra, to share the screen.
We are actually at step 2, where we're going to go through the guide and the rubrics. So for step 2.
Oh, okay.
And then after each of these, we'll give you some tips too.
And I'm going to get back up to step 2 so I don't make it all.
Okay. Yeah. Step 2 is on page 21, Zoltan.
Okay.
If you want, I can give you page cues so that you don't have to scroll.
Oh, that'd be great. Okay. Myself seasick.
I had them all marked out so that I could do that if I was sharing.
There we go. Okay,
Okay,
step
perfect.
2.
Hopefully you can all see that. Well, part 1 of step 2 is conduct the learning segment. So this is where they're doing the actual teaching. Again, 2 more green call out boxes. We'll keep going. Step 2, or sorry, let me not say step 2. Part 2 of step 2, teach and assess, is selecting and annotating the video clips. Okay, and there are 4. So video clip 1, instruction and assessment of academic language development. Again, these clips are up to 5 minutes each. The assessor, I'm going to remind you again, will stop watching the video at the 5-minute mark. So if they upload a longer one, the rest of that video will not be seen. They do need to actually make clips for these and not just post the whole video and say, this information, I do this between this point and this timestamp. They need to actually post just the clip, okay? All of the annotations are used across all of the video clips. They can be used more than once, but all need to be used at least once. Were you gonna say something, Zoltan? I thought you.
No.
Oh, okay. And then video clip 2 is the students' use of technology. I wanna stress here, the use of technology is not just logging on to something. So candidates really want to be thinking about how are they using technology to deepen content knowledge and further learning for children, not just, for example, we were all in an online setting. Sometimes candidates will say, well, we're using Zoom for our class to meet as a class. That's not the type of educational technology we're talking about. We're talking about deepening content learning. Some candidates were creative and used things like Kahoots to have students group together and talk about content. That would be more along the lines of educational technology. Okay, and then video clip 3, instruction and informal assessment of content. Okay, how they provided opportunities for multiple students to engage in deep learning of content and develop their skills. Again, deep learning is emphasized here. And then video clip 4 is the instruction of the self-assessment of content. So again, in this video, they are the candidate is modeling how to self-assess using the rubric. Then they're going to have at least one student use that rubric to self-assess and conference with that student about their self-assessment. There's another green call out box, very important to read. And then here are the list of, here's the annotations that they need to have, okay? Annotation titles that they need to use. And then another green call out box below that talks about annotations and labels. And then part 3 of step 2 is the analysis of the informal and student self-assessments. This is where the candidate really needs to make sure they're not just stating something, but they're talking about how and why. Really explaining as if, remembering the assessor was not in the room with them, even though they're going to see video, and really explaining what happened and why and how. Okay, we keep going. It shows the evidence to be submitted for this step. Step 2 is part G, the 4 annotated video clips, no more than 5 minutes each. And part H, the written narrative, answering questions on the analysis of informal and student self-assessment. No more than 3 pages. The page limits are important. Assessors will stop reading at that page limit.
And for the rubrics, part 2, step 2, there are 5 of them. And again, those are the sources of evidence are just the annotated video clips and the videos, and part H, the written narrative. So again, rubric 2.3 is really focused on the development and support of academic language in relation to the content-specific goals. So where are they really working with students around understanding that academic language? And again, this goes back to that place where you in a 3 to 5 lesson segment, you're probably doing that multiple times over 3 to 5 lessons, and that just gives you a lot of lot to pull from in your video clips if you've recorded all of that. Again, as Cassandra said, how are the candidates incorporating educational technology? And as she said, and the key words here on the rubric are that they are, the resources are used to enhance, improve, and or demonstrate knowledge, skills, and or abilities. So like, how does technology enhance or improve their ability to learn the concept or to demonstrate their knowledge? So things like technology that is used for collaboration, technology that is used for analysis, technology that is used for graphically, organizing data, that kind of thing, where they're actually doing something with the learning to improve, and the technology is helping them make sense of it in a more clear way. Again, this piece, how does the candidate use informal assessments? It used to be that they needed to provide a rubric for this, but informal assessment happens as you're teaching. So sometimes informal assessment is a look on a student's face of confusion. And so how are they adjusting their instruction to meet the needs of the learners in real time? I think sometimes young teachers think that if they're not sticking with the plan, that they're not doing well, but it's actually good teaching is we're going to stop, we're going to pause, we're going to go off the plan for a bit as needed.
And just to add real quick, what Zoltan just said is a good point. He said in the informal assessment, it could have been a look of confusion on a student's face. Even though the lesson is videotaped, the assessor may not pick up that same nuance in the student because they're not with those students every day. That may not have been picked up as well in the video, but the candidate needs to explain that. During informal assessment, I noticed blank. So just make sure that they point those things out.
Okay. Next is the student self-assessment. And again, Cassandra noted, this is asking the candidates to model the self-assessment with multiple students. Again, if they're using a rubric, they don't have to model the entire rubric. They're modeling the use of one particular construct in the rubric, that's appropriate. But they're doing that with multiple students, then they're having one or more students use that rubric. And again, they don't have to be assessing on the entire rubric. That would be hard to do with a complex rubric in 5 minutes. The thing that's been added for your version 4.1 is that if you look down at the bottom, they have the student self-assessment as one source of evidence. They have the video, but they also have the written narrative. So the feedback they provide the students on the self-assessment, they can document that in part H. So they can note that after the student assessed themselves on the rubric, I gave them feedback about their self-assessment, and this is what the feedback was that I gave them. They don't have to show that necessarily on the video, but we do have to see them modeling and a student using it. And then rubric 2.7 is how are they using the results of the informal assessment, student self-assessment, to provide actionable feedback. This is a key part here for students to improve or revise their work. Again, aligning that feedback to the learning goals and providing it in a way that students can use it to improve their work and their understanding. Okay, and with that, I'm going to stop sharing. We'll go back to Cassandra's screen.
Oops. Not letting me, hold on, let me try. This is a workout in what to do if, right? This is good. This is a chance to. Uh-oh. Let's see if it'll let me just advance because there we go. Okay. So some tips for success for step 2, teach and assess. Video clip 2. I talked about this a little bit already, the use of educational technology. Students need to be using the technology to enhance, improve, and or demonstrate knowledge, skills, and abilities related to the learning goals. Again, it is not just logging on or using a laptop or a particular program. Video clip 4, the candidate needs to model the self-assessment rubric to students and then have one or more students use it and provide feedback. We often get the question, can you really do that in 5 minutes? Yes, candidates can. It is doable. They may need to practice, but they can do it.
Sandra, can I
Yes,
question?
yes.
So that typically when I get to this point of going over this with my candidates, I
Mhm.
some blank stares from my TK and kindergarten folks, and I was a high school person, so sometimes I struggle with this question as well. And I know you're early childhood expert, so are there what are the more effective things that you're seeing in like a TK kindergarten for use of technology?
I see things like, and Zoltan can jump in here too. We see things like Kahoot. We see things like Jamboard sometimes. And students, the funny thing is, children often are better with technology than we are, right? But the children can use them as maybe they are in small group and they're noting ideas. Maybe they are asking each other questions and, you know, recording something. Maybe they're clicking on a picture and asking each other questions, but it goes beyond just using. Yeah.
No,
Zoltan, do you have anything you want to add to
Yeah.
that?
I also think like if they're in the classroom setting and they've got smart board where they've got text up and students can touch the board and move text around and to form sentences and sort of collaborate around that kind of thing. I think those are some of the uses of technology for younger children.
Yeah.
But again, having them sort of take like a rote kind of quiz or something on technology, that's the same. You could do that on paper. So
Right.
Right.
Okay, that's helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Go ahead.
How about if they're collaborating on a Google Doc or Google,
Yeah.
one of the Google
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the key point there is that the children are collaborating and
Yeah.
sharing ideas. So that will help deepen their content knowledge.
And I think about those, you know, I always think about the verbs. So collaborate, analyze, arrange, you know, all those kinds of verbs that like, how can we use technology to be more efficient at those kinds of things or more effective at those kinds of things? And that should help learning. And in the program guide, there are some suggestions for how to think about use of technology.
Any other questions about that? That first
Okay.
tips for success? I'm sorry, I can't see any. Are there any questions in the chat, Zoltan?
No, we're good.
Okay. Additional tips for success for step 2, the annotations. This is very important. They should explain what's happening in the time-stamped video clip, but the candidate should also provide a rationale. So they are encouraged to explain what is seen in ways that demonstrate that the teaching is intentional. Not just, you know, I created a, you know, I showed the students how to self-assess here, but they can explain their rationale and how they went about doing that. If something goes wrong in the video, and candidates ask this a lot in office hours, it's okay. That's part of teaching. It happens. Everyone who has ever taught anyone in a classroom setting knows that. And assessors know that too. If something goes wrong in the video, that's okay. Just explain, they need to explain how they dealt with it in the video annotations and commentary, and rather than ignoring something that's very obvious. That could be a behavior situation, that could be something didn't work and they had to adjust like we've had to this morning. That's okay. They just need to explain it. And they'll need to describe what students need to do next to continue progress toward the academic, the content-specific learning goals. As we said for step 1, describing what they need to do next is not satisfied by just giving an assignment. Next, we're going to fill out this worksheet. Next, we're going to do this. We'll do part 2 next. That's not next steps to make progress toward content-specific learning goal.
So question,
Yes.
so if the intern does a recording and they're trying to hit a particular aspect of their CalTPA requirements, but in that 5 minutes, there is a situation that occurs, like you said, a behavioral thing, and that takes over their clip, I guess they will try to find something else in the video, right, to use it, because I mean, they can't use definitely that time.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So like if they're in the middle of modeling student self-assessment and something goes wrong, they might have to So that's actually a reason to have multiple times when they're doing student self-assessment, so they can catch that.
Right, I guess in the sense they can use that as an excuse, as like, oh, that's my 5 minutes, but yeah, they can't
Yeah.
submit that, right? Okay.
No, it's
Yeah.
the evidence still that's requested still has to be presented in the clips. That's a good question. Any other questions?
Oh, hi, Cassandra. Yeah, so I see it says time-stamped video. Does that mean, like, are you talking about like when they actually make the video, they have to have date and timestamp? Or do you mean like when they upload it onto the CalTPA platform, it creates a timestamp?
No, it's the annotations are at a timestamp. So
Right.
they'll mark it. So annotation at minute 1 minute and 10 seconds. This is where the annotation fits.
Okay,
And what
Because
it does
again,
is
they
it-
have-
And that happens in the Pearson system. So all they need is a video clip. When they upload it to the system, they'll use the embedded annotation tool to apply the annotations.
thank you.
Mhm.
Oops, lost me.
other questions.
Any other questions?
Okay.
I can't see the chat. I'm sorry, Zoltan.
No, we're good.
Okay,
Um,
Okay, so we
let's,
just keep
go
going.
ahead.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to step 3, which is reflect.
And Lori, do you have the reflect or step page number?
As they're pulling that up, I just want to say before we begin talking about this step is, as we talked about in cycle 1, this is often has been a difficult step for a lot of candidates. And I think it centers around the issue of reflecting. A lot of times candidates want to simply restate what they did. They really need to draw evidence from steps 1 and 2, and they need to explain the how and why, and what that tells them about what the students learned and about their teaching. So again, as I said, for cycle 1, they have these puzzle pieces. They really need to fit the puzzle together for the assessor. The assessor should not need to guess the why and the how. So for part 1 in step 3, reflect, it is analyze the formal assessment responses. And this is where they're going to talk about those formal assessments with students and the rubric. No problem, David. Again, there are 2 green call out boxes. Please encourage candidates to pay close attention to those.
And also key here is that they are selecting 3 student responses. Again, one from a student who exceeded the learning goals, one who met them, and one who did not meet them yet. Go ahead, Cassandra.
They will share the results of the formal assessment. Okay, and with respect to the learning goal, and talk about that and why one student met, one student exceeded, and a third student did not meet. Okay. It shows you the evidence to be submitted. Part I and J. Part I is the formal assessment responses from 3 students. Those are the exceeded, met, and not yet met with feedback. And part J, the written narrative answering the questions about that explain the how and the why.
And we'll go down to the video or the rubrics for this. Again, there is one rubric for reflect. And this is how do they analyze the formal assessment results based on the rubric and identify and describe learning patterns and or trends for the students and determine what was most and least effective. So that language is new for year 4, determining what was most and least effective. And so that gets to Cassandra's point. Many candidates would just sort of describe what was happening and they wouldn't really take that reflective stance on what they were doing. So this is a key piece for year 4 version.
And it may be helpful to have some practice, sometimes for candidates to practice writing a reflection, even outside of the TPA, just because it seems to be a skill that a lot of candidates really struggle with. how to truly reflect.
So I'll leave it to you. There we go.
Okay, let's see if let me scroll down to where we are now. Okay.
We get it working this time.
Okay, step 3, reflect. We talked about the steps and the rubrics. So here are some tips for success. Okay, so reflective writing is comparative in nature. So you're talking about where you were, what you thought you were going to do, what happened, and how you're going to use that information. What happened when the lesson was taught as compared to what they planned? What was effective and what was less effective? Okay. To write reflectively, the candidate really should look to the evidence. They must cite evidence from steps 1 and 2 and use that evidence to explain. For example, in part 1, I plan to connect the current lesson to the story we read in the previous lesson. In video clip 1, where I made that connection, several students had confusion about the character in that story. That connects evidence from steps 1 and 2. It explains what they were going to do, and how what happened in the lesson was different from what they planned. So that is a reflective segment of writing. Be specific, not general. Okay.
You know, I'm sorry to jump in, but that's a very important thing that I've always admonished in my interns, because sometimes they just want to jump into the lesson, you know, but they forget to connect to what they were doing before. I'm like, look, you're doing a great job introducing the lesson you're about to, but how does that connect to what you're doing before? The students got to see the connection from the information you're presenting, from the standards, from the approach, the concepts. Otherwise, they're going to think everything is just isolated. Everything is just, okay,
Yes.
random.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's an
Absolutely.
excellent point. And the fact that you're doing that with them outside of the TPA will help them do it when they're completing the TPA as well, and in their practice going forward, because that's an excellent practice to get into.
I think for candidates to know there's no such thing as a perfect lesson. I mean, we're dealing with human beings and we're dealing with 20 or 30 of them at a time. And so it's not going to be perfect. And there's always something that's not going to go as you planned.
And a lot of them get very nervous about that. They come into office hours very nervous about that.
And it's a good thing to remind them, hey, it's okay. We're not looking for a perfect lesson, because how else are you going to grow unless you make some mistakes? We make mistakes when we started teaching as well. So it's okay if you make mistakes. Don't worry about, we're not looking, oh my God, we're not going to fail you because you didn't go, you know, X, Y, and Z type lesson.
Right, right.
Absolutely. Okay, other questions or thoughts about the reflection piece? Yeah, teaching is certainly an imperfect science.
Oops, sorry,
Okay.
I didn't mean to
We'll
go
back
forward.
to apply.
Okay,
Just scroll
step
up.
4 is apply. So we sometimes get this question as well. Well, how is step 4 different from step 3? They're two sides of the same coin. Step 3, reflect, is looking to the past, what happened and what did I do and why? And step 4 is apply, looking toward the future. What will I do differently next? What would I do the same? That is step 4. So step 4, part 1, is next steps for learning. Okay, so they're based on the summary and analysis they did of student learning in the informal assessment, the student self-assessment, and the formal assessment, and evidence from the video clips of their teaching practice. They're going to respond to some prompts about the next steps for learning. Okay. Part 2 of step 4, apply, is follow-up instruction, which is reteaching or extension activity. So based on their analysis from steps 2 and 3, they're going to either do a reteach lesson or an extension lesson for students who met or exceeded the goals, reteaching for students who did not yet meet the content-specific learning goals and ELD goals. Another green call-out box. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, another green call-out box. Go ahead, Zoltan.
No, we're fine.
Oh, okay. So their activity here is reteaching or extension, and that is for whole class or small group from the class. Okay. Part 3 of apply is the teach and video record the follow-up instruction. This video clip is also no more than 5 minutes and demonstrates that follow-up instruction that was reteaching or extension. Okay, and there.
And I think the key here is that the instruction differs from the learning segment. So the idea here is that if you taught in one particular way in the learning segment, or used particular resources, and some students either needed extension on that, or they needed additional support, to do the same thing over again is probably not effective. So what are you doing differently than what you did in the learning segment?
And this goes back to, that's a good point, Zoltan. That also goes back to reflect, because if you're reflecting on what happened in the lesson, and especially like, let's say, for example, students who didn't meet the learning goals, right? You need to really think about why that happened and what needs to happen differently next time. And that would help to reteach in a different manner. Because there's a video clip, there will be annotation again for that clip of the reteaching or extension lesson. Okay. And the evidence to be submitted here is part K, which is the written narrative explaining the next steps for learning and reteaching or extension activity, no more than 7 pages. And again, that is for whole class or a group of students. And then part L.
And the last rubric, 2.9, is focused on how did they use their analysis of the results from the assessments to plan and teach a follow-up learning activity. And then a key line in this essential question, and to provide a rationale for the activity choice and citing evidence for that rationale. So, you know, I decided to work with a small group of students out of the whole class who needed additional support, and this was the evidence for why they needed additional support, and this is what I did, and then demonstrate that on the video clip. I will stop my share.
Okay. Oops, did we talk about, oh, tips for success, step 4. So we want to encourage the candidates to cite evidence, implicit or explicit, from those student assessment responses to support their choice of the follow-up activity, that reteach or extension. They want to build a reteaching or extension activity that is not part of this step 1 learning segment template. That's what Zoltan was talking about, in that they should not go back in and just repeat the same exact lesson. And provide a rationale for why the different teaching approach and resources will provide different results for students, either supporting or extending their learning. Okay. Any questions about step 4?
Yes, I have a question sort of similar to the last one. Is it more advantageous to do a reteach rather than an extension?
Not in regards to scoring, no. I mean, the guidance, and candidates ask that too, and the guidance we would give is you need to do what is your students need. That's what they need to do. And both are part of, that could be part of this assessment. So either one is fine, but they need to do what the students need.
The important piece here is the rationale. That's if the rationale is not strong, they're not going to do as well. So whatever they choose, they need to know why. Again, that idea of intentionality.
Question, guys.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Sorry, Cassandra, go ahead.
Sorry, they'll have to understand how to look at those assessment pieces from students to come up with that rationale. Sorry.
It's okay. So mine is more of a logistic question. I'm new to supporting interns in this facet of the program. So I was just wondering if you guys had the top of the head, how many videos is it they're required to submit all together for parts?
For cycle 2?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
actually, we're going to get, we actually have a slide coming up.
Oh, okay.
So why don't should we move to that slide,
Sure.
Cassandra?
Okay.
There we go. Next slide.
Here we go. See, we anticipated that. Okay, so for cycle 2 video clip requirements. So you have 4 video clips in step 3. Okay. You've got video clips 1, where it's 2 or more students and the candidate must be visible. Again, visible is not a full-on frontal face shot. It can be a shoulder, a hand, arms, legs, anything that indicates we're looking at a human. Video clip 2 is 2 or more students must be visible. The candidate may or may not be visible in video clip 2. Video clip 3, 2 or more students and the candidate must be visible. And video clip 4, they're going to select a clip of them modeling the assessment with 2 or more students. And then at least one student will use the assessment and the candidate will conference with that student about that. And the candidate must be visible in clip 4.
And if I could interrupt, Cassandra, I see we have a
Sure.
typo here. It's actually step 2 video clip requirements, teach and assess. It says
Oh,
step
yes, it
3.
is. I'm sorry. Yes, it is.
Uh,
Teach and
that
assess.
was, I did not.
Step
notice
3
that.
is reflect. Sorry, teach and assess. It should be step 2 video clip requirements. And then for step 4, apply, there is one clip, 2 or more students, and the candidate must be visible. That is the reteach or the extension. Okay.
So for cycle 2, there are 5 videos altogether.
David, did you have a question?
Yeah, actually that slide just prompted a thought. I'm working with a new district that's struggling with allowing our students to videotape roll. And for cycle 1 and or cycle 2, just their students. And I typically think of videotaping the whole class, for a portion of the, but in cycle, if I project, looking at this slide, it reminded me, if I could get them to allow our student teacher to film 2 students, it's not what I want to do, but if I had to, I could go in that direction for cycle 2, but I'm trying to go back to cycle 1. Are there times I'm just blanking. We could probably use that few students in cycle 1 as well, right?
Yes.
2 or more. Yes,
more.
2 or more.
The intention is that we're filming the entire class. Like if we're in the space, but for the online thing where some students don't want to show their picture, their images, then we've more clarified it. That's 2 or more.
So,
And if
That would be-
sometimes you get a situation where some parents give permission and others don't. They can also change the angle of their camera. So maybe if that student A, their parent didn't give permission, but the rest did, they can change the angle of the camera, get the students from behind. The back of a head counts as a child.
yeah,
So it doesn't have to be full on face.
this isn't, we talked about the camera angles a lot. It's not that issue. It's really just a district policy.
Yeah.
And a guide.
Zoltan?
Yes.
Zoltan, I remember, I think it was San Bernardino shared they were having a similar problem with their school district. And they came up with a letter, I think, that they shared with their district that was able to convince the district to allow filming explicitly for TPA purposes, and maybe connecting David with that person. It might have been Joe, I'm not sure.
I think it was Joe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
strategy that he employed that was successful and got his district to come over to his side.
Yeah. So, David, if you will contact me at the CalTPA at CTC website, I will connect you with Joe. I'm sure he's always happy to
Okay.
share.
I did send a letter to the district, from CTC that talks about videotaping, and so I'm hoping they've stalled. They said no, and now they've stalled. So anyway,
We've also seen candidates who have sort of made a personal connection with families to say that, like, this is the purpose of why I'm filming. It's for my career, basically. And then to really just on a one-to-one communication to talk about like how the videos are going to be secure. They're not going to be getting out on the internet. They're going to be held very securely. Therefore, scoring and occasionally training purposes, but they're very carefully used. And then after they're destroyed after, is it 5 or 10 years?
4 years.
4 years, okay. So they're erased after 4 years.
Yeah.
So if candidates let parents know that, sometimes they feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I can usually work with parents. It's a district. Sometimes it's an issue. So, all
Yeah.
right, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
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 Sultan?
Yeah, so again, we spoke about this for cycle 1, but really thinking about looking at the acceptable support resources that are online on the CTC website, and they're also on in the program guide. Really working with, providing feedback to candidates, having them look at one another's submissions, doing peer scoring and feedback sessions with them. Giving them direct feedback on their submission is perfectly acceptable. The only thing is that they have to write their own CalTPA. They can get writing tips. One of the suggestions there is that if they're struggling with clarity in their writing, to connect them with a writing center at the school to help them with more clearly communicating. And so it's, with the exception of them writing it themselves, the acceptable support is pretty broad. Again, there's sort of a urban legend out there that CalTPA, we're not allowed to provide them feedback or to support them. It's more of an independent thing. That is not the case, because we're really trying to signal that teaching is a reflective and collaborative process, and that's part of the work, and it's perfectly fine for them to do that.
And
It's
can I
actually preferable
add
for them.
something real
Yeah.
quick,
Mhm.
Sultan?
Yes.
When candidates come to candidate office hours, if we hear in their questions or the things that they're saying that they really need more support, we also will reach out and email you and say, we had this candidate in office hours, this is what was said, they might need some more support. So we do that as well.
And if you're interested, the candidate office hours are on Wednesday afternoons at 4:15. We have faculty members join with that and sit in and listen to what candidates are saying. I think that's, so you're perfectly welcome to join those sessions as well. We've been building some nice communities with candidates, and I think it's useful to have faculty members there as well. So,
tips for preparing and checking cycle 2. Try to see if you can provide some locally designed reflection guides to foster candidate review. Encourage them to ensure each requirement has been addressed and check the strength of their narrative. Also, and Zoltan just talked about that with getting some coaching on writing. Provide opportunities for candidates to apply rubric criteria to their own work or to a peer submission. And this will also help them in cycle 2 because they have to create a rubric for student self-assessment.
Again, tips for remediating. If candidate did not pass a cycle, really help them process that. It's a difficult, it's a difficult thing with it. They're juggling so many things as young teachers, and so really to provide that emotional support. Again, we've talked about this in multiple ways, but really deconstruct the submission. That's really critical. I mean, and again, really thinking like an assessor. An assessor is going to deconstruct the submission based on the constructs in the rubrics. And so guide them through that process as well. Have peers do that process with each other's submissions as well. Take a piece of it, just do a one-for-one matchup. Where's the evidence for this construct? And is that evidence strong evidence, or could it be improved? And then also thinking about some of the reflection guides for them to look at, to sort of reflect on their own submissions based on context of your space.
Thank you.
Okay.
Questions. So
Yes.
if an intern does not pass, can they try again? How many times? How does that work?
So yes, they should. Again, they will get the scores for their rubrics, and they'll see which rubrics they did well on, and they'll see which rubrics they didn't do well on, which ones they need to focus on. this would be a time for them to really look at that submission, do that, again, that alignment of where's the evidence for each of those constructs, what's missing. They can submit as many times as they want. We encourage them to really, I think candidates who have to resubmit multiple times, what we find from them is they're not getting feedback in between submissions. So, and that's, you know, that's sad because it's often a waste of money. They've resubmitted basically the same thing, or the changes they made were not really targeted at what needed to be done. So really encouraging them to go through a revision process with feedback from mentors, from peers, before they resubmit.
Thank you.
And we also pay attention. We occasionally see candidates who have submitted multiple times, and we will reach out to the programs to, you know, that Pearson collects that data and
Yeah,
we-
so Zoltan, I think I've heard Amy advise programs, the CTC's expectation is that the programs will provide remediation at least once as a matter of course,
Yeah.
but that she advised them to put in writing in their program guide, or whatever that's called, your information guide for candidates, how many times you will provide support for candidates.
Yeah.
As part of your program guidelines or rules or whatever.
Okay. We've talked about online settings for video. These are here for a resource. There are also resources on the CTC website. For hopefully this is again less of an issue. But here's just a few things to think about, and we can just scroll through these slides, Cassandra.
Okay.
So again, and now we'll turn that to Lori.
Oh, you're on mute.
Again, I believe most of the folks with us online this morning know how and where to access the materials. The main thing I want to emphasize or restate is that we did recently release a new versioning of the CalTPA guides and a couple of the templates. So and that happened on the September 10th. So if you downloaded materials prior to September 10th, you'll want to go back to the CalTPA website and download materials again and replace the ones that you have, outdated versions that you have with the new versions. And please also make sure that all of your candidates and faculty and staff do the same. Also, you've heard Zoltan and Cassandra reference the program guide a couple of times during today's presentation. The program guide is different, separate from the Cycle 1 and Cycle 2 assessment guides. This was designed as a companion guide for faculty and staff to provide more resources for supporting candidates with the assessment. Some of the foundational concepts behind the design of the CalTPA and more insight into the CalTPA. This guide is available for download both on the faculty resource webpage, but we also put it on the candidate facing materials, assessment materials page as well. Candidates are welcome to download this guide and look at it as well. So we highly encourage programs to use this companion guide as an additional support. And just to emphasize, the program guide would be useful to all faculty and staff at your program. Anyone who is in a supporting capacity with candidates, especially course instructors and master mentor teachers, field supervisors and such.
Okay.
Any questions about accessing materials?
Okay. and program supports.
And just to point out, we do have a submission deadline schedule. It is posted on the CalTPA website. Throughout the year, we have specific deadlines, but candidates can submit anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year. Candidates can submit at any time. The only purpose for the submission deadlines is to allow us to batch scoring. And so if you look at the first submission deadline, August 26th, all candidates who got their submissions in by that deadline received their scores yesterday, September 16th. The next submission, the next score reporting date is October 7th. So all candidates who got their submissions in by yesterday can expect to receive their scores on October 7th. If they miss the deadline, their submission was still accepted. It just means they're in the next scoring batch and they won't receive their scores until November 4th.
Okay, again, we talked about the weekly office hours and candidate office hours every Wednesday from 4:15 to 5, and faculty is certainly welcome. Join that conversation. The teacher induction program office hours, first and third Thursdays at 9, and then program office hours from 10, each first and third Thursday from 10 o'clock. We mentioned the virtual think tanks. We're going to hold 4 this year. October 29th is the first one, and it will again be focused on asset-based instruction. And then we have we didn't get it shifted on this one. Lori, it's January 21st, 2022, right?
It's January 20th, 2022, March 31st, 2022, and June 9th, 2022.
Okay, and we will, I'm going to be sending these out, this presentation out to everybody that signed up this morning. And we will make those changes on this before we send that. Okay.
The CTC has its own YouTube channel. There is the link. There are a lot of great videos on there that can deep dives and VTTs, virtual think tanks, and also performance assessment has its own group of video supports. It's been great. It's great for catching up on missed sessions, and you can help new faculty members, and you can even share those with candidates.
Okay. So final questions. Thank you all for raising the questions as we go. Any final thoughts for today?
Not a question on the cycle, but on subject matter. Is that possible at this time?
Sure.
So as of right now, what are the accepted ways that interns can meet subject matter for the program?
So it's the main, well, 2 things. Their learning goals have to be based on California state standards. And then all of the single subject and also the multiple subjects focus is that they are using discipline-specific pedagogies that are approved, that are thought of as appropriate practice for those particular disciplines. So, for example, and in a science class, so sort of a lab-based or inquiry-based approach, and those are the kinds of things that they're learning in their programs. But what is the appropriate discipline-specific strategies that are used? So those are the 2 things: standards and pedagogies.
Okay, thank you.
Or maybe Angel, I don't know if he was asking about how do candidates demonstrate subject matter competencies, because I think there's been some changes to that, but that's kind of outside of CalTPA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that yes too, Nancy.
Okay.
That would be helpful too.
Yeah. Could we stop the share, maybe, Cassandra? So other questions? Yeah, I think that's
Hi, I'm Alex Patterson from
Hi.
TCOE, Tulare County Office of Ed and Impact Program, and I'm the new coordinator.
oh, great.
I
Alex.
I have a quick question about the assessment guide for cycle 1.
Mhm.
The one that I uploaded, I think Saturday, the 11th, on page 19, and it might just be me, could be me. I don't see any changes to that page. So I was wondering if I'm not looking at it right, but I do see that the changes made on the template. So that question 5, I believe.
Does the front cover of the guide you're looking at say 4.1?
Yes, I checked that about 3 different times.
I don't have the guide up.
Oh,
Page
there was a
19.
change. There was a change to the, I believe on the, it may be this one. There was one change that got changed on the template, but then it's listed on the list of changes. I'm sorry, Lori, what do we call that? The
update
Yeah.
document.
yeah, the update document has advice that.
I'm navigating to page 19 of the.
But I did see it on the changes overview update page.
You saw it. Okay.
But on the actual program guide, it's not in there. And so
Yeah,
I
which
need to read.
which
Can I look
change?
at- Sorry.
Which change was it?
I believe it's on step 4, apply that 5th question. That it's added to the template, but it's not in the assessment guide. So
Okay. Would you,
I thought maybe it's just me.
yeah, could you do me a favor and then just email the CalTPA email address for that question, and we'll look into it and get right back to you. Okay. Thank you.
And then just one more thing that you mentioned, I believe on Wednesday in cycle 1, that there were updates to the program guide related to the cultural and linguistic and funds of knowledge. And I tried to find that too, and it wasn't popping out at me. But that would be really helpful because I'm already seeing candidates struggling with
Yes.
those questions.
If you, what, I don't have that particular new program guide in front of me. There is a section, if you open the document and do a find for the term funds of knowledge, did you do that?
Yes.
Okay, and it's not coming up?
I'm not, well, I thought maybe I'm looking for something more specific and maybe it's not. So I just, because those words do pop up, of course.
Okay, okay. Let
If
me,
I'm asking too specific of questions, just let me know.
okay.
I'll be quiet.
And again, with that question, yeah, we'll let you know if I can point you to something more specific. But again, the end of the month, end of October, we'll also be holding that session, the virtual think tank, which I think will be very useful as well.
Okay, thank you. And my purpose for asking the questions is to make sure that I am not missing anything because I am new. So
absolutely, these questions are the things that help us think about how to support candidates and programs. So thank you for that. Okay, with that, if
Everybody?
another question? Okay.
No, not for me. Just I want to say thank you.
All
Yeah,
right.
same. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. And again, any questions you have, office hours or the email address, either to the CTC or to Pearson, we're always waiting to help and provide clarity. So again, thank you for all your work with candidates. hope it's going to be a successful year for all of us, and things continue to settle down. So be well.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.